Okay, we are going to start. I sound really loud for a second there. Am I good? Okay. So if you're online, hi. If you're here, I see your face. And you're not new if you're here because I know everybody in the room, so I don't have to do the if you're new thing. My name is Pastor Patty. And I am here because Pastor Jason cannot be here this evening. So we are probably not going to go as long as when my husband is here. So just be patient with me. I explained to a couple of people that I agreed to do this Thursday. And then I had several frantic phone calls yesterday. So I did not have a lot of time to prepare. But this was what was on my heart. So we decided to go with it. So guess what topic we're going to talk about?
Space travel.
The favorite topic at the exchange, love. So I really, I've watched this congregation for a long time, and I think that this congregation actually does love very well. I think that we actually do it better than a lot of churches. When somebody needs something, everybody jumps in, everybody takes care of what each other needs, we celebrate each other, and we show genuine concern for each other. But the part of love that I want to talk about today is the side of love that we don't hear about. And it's the side of love that doesn't necessarily feel good, the side that can drain you, that can wipe you out, but that is, to me, it's just as important as all the warm and fuzzy stuff. So let's talk about a few things that we know about how Jesus asked us to love. We know from Luke 10 that we are to love our neighbor as ourselves, and that the definition of a neighbor is all-inclusive, because when asked who our neighbor is, Jesus goes into the story of the Good Samaritan, someone who was avoided, despised by the Jews, and yet Jesus is telling the expert in the law that his neighbor is the Samaritan through this parable. So that means even the people we don't like, we are called to love. We also know from Matthew 28 that we're told to go to all people making disciples. So we don't get to pick and choose. Now, I do believe that people are called to specific groups a lot of times of people that they just have a heart and a passion for, but we are called to love all people. And then we're going to look at our favorite scripture here, 1 Corinthians, and we'll just review it real quick. If I speak human or angelic languages but do not have love, I am a sounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith so I can move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. And if I donate all my goods to feed the poor, and if I give my body in order to boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind. Love does not envy, it is not boastful, it is not conceited, does not act improperly, is not selfish, is not provoked, and does not keep a record of wrongs. Love finds no joy in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. So if we know that we're to love all people like Jesus did and Jesus displayed, why did Paul need to give us instruction on what love looked like? And I would say that's because most people don't understand what love looked like. So we're reaching out to people who don't understand what love looked like. Paul saw the things like in that time that we see in our world today. He saw people that would proclaim to love you, but they were impatient, unkind. They were envious, boastful, and proud. They dishonored those that they loved. They were self-seeking. They were easily angered and held a record of wrongs against those they said they loved. There was a love that rejected truth and found pleasure in evil things, and a love that did not protect, did not gain trust, and was not hopeful and did not endure. So Paul was seeing the same thing we see today. If we look at the world around us today, we can see all of those things, the self-seeking. Sometimes we see it even within the church. And I think that's something that always hurts our hearts, is when we see people within the church who are saying that they love like Jesus does, but yet they're doing some of these things and they're causing battles and wars to form in congregations. So that version of love that people proclaim, but is opposite of what Paul's teaching, is a love that actually tears down and destroys hearts. Have you ever experienced somebody that you love with that 1 Corinthians love, and then what they give you in return is the exact opposite? And you're sitting there just completely blown away because you don't understand how could they not love you the way Jesus and through Paul said to love. Have you found yourself like all in a relationship only to find out that the other person had an agenda the whole time, and that once their agenda was done, they were done with you? Have you ever believed that the love you shared with somebody was enough to weather any storm until the storm came and they were gone? It's painful to love with our whole Jesus heart and to be hurt, be rejected, and have people walk away. Yet we also know that Jesus had the exact same encounters. He wasn't foreign to the things that we feel. Can you imagine Jesus he was carrying the heart of God, and he was watching almost everyone who said that they loved him walk away from him? To know that somebody that you loved like a brother was going to deny you, and another was going to hand you over to be crucified? Like, I can't imagine that grief that he was feeling. But I also know that when we make a choice to love others, that sometimes it comes with grief. Because when you can look at somebody beyond their circumstances, when you can see who they really are, and you can love that person that Jesus has placed in front of you, you're vulnerable. You open yourself up and you're vulnerable. And you're vulnerable to pain and grief because you're loving them. And they're imperfect just like you are. And in that, you can get hurt. So the reason we're talking about this is I have a lot of examples. Over the past 2 years, I've experienced two different things. I've experienced the gift of loving others, and I've experienced the grief of loving others. And it seems like it's been over and over and over again. And sometimes those two things were so intertwined that there was a gift and grief at the same time. So I'm just going to give you some examples of what it looks like to love like Jesus even when you're hurting. I remember spending countless hours over several years, and I'm talking like 6 years, praying for somebody. And they kept making choices that were just devastating. And none of us could understand, why would they keep making these choices? Why? How? They were getting so much love. We were pouring love out to them. And they finally one day made a choice to go do something that was going to lead them to health. And we were all excited. And we made phone calls with them and for them, and we pushed through a bunch of obstacles that came up, and we recommended them, and we did everything we could. And the day came to go. And we went, and we were met with a ton of opposition. Most people would have just walked away. Most people would have justifiably walked away. Letty was actually with me that day. We were standing in a dirty alleyway with cockroaches and everything else back there. And I think we stood there for about 2 hours waiting and encouraging and saying, no, we're doing this today. Most people would have just walked away. But we couldn't walk away because Jesus told us to love. And love in that moment meant that we stood firm and we said, no, we're doing this. I remember when we drove home that day, I remember feeling like I could breathe, like I could finally breathe. And that happens to me a lot. Like there'll be a situation and I don't even realize that I don't feel like I can breathe until after it's over, and I take this deep cleansing breath. I'm like, oh, there. But I can remember that. And I was so hopeful that everything was going to go right. And then a couple days later, the phone calls started coming in to me. She was fighting the plan every step of the way. She was manipulating. She was trying to avoid all the rules. She was looking for any way to get out of doing what she needed to do. She was rejecting everybody. And the thing is knowing what was going on, she probably wanted to be rejected. She wanted to be kicked out. She wanted an excuse to be kicked out. So about 6 weeks into this, I got a call that she had decided she was going to make a horrible choice and walk away from the nice little safe place that we had her. So I tried to talk to her, and before she would even get on the phone and hear my voice, she hung up on me. They went to hand her the phone, she hung up. She refused to even hear my voice. I went that day actually to the Ren Fair with a group of people from here. And I remember walking around the Ren Fair that day, and I was kind of in a fog because my phone kept blowing up. I kept getting tons of messages, and my heart was hurting. And everything just seemed to be spinning. Like, I don't remember focusing on where I was that day. And I tried to. I really did try to. I just couldn't believe that with everything we had done, she would just walk away. We felt like we had poured out all the love that we could, and it felt like she was rejecting our love. We know that she was rejecting the love of Jesus, and that the ability to surrender to Jesus isn't always an easy one. And I know that later on she told me how much of a struggle she had with that word of surrender. So that day, I felt like I couldn't breathe again. I felt dread. And before 7 a.m. the next morning, my phone went off. I knew before I answered the phone who the call was going to be about. And as I answered the phone, I heard, "We have you listed as an emergency contact." And I just stopped for a second. Now, thankfully, the nurse on the other end told me that she was stable, but she was in bad condition. I knew the opportunity she walked away from, and I knew that the path that she was choosing right then and there was going to lead to more of those phone calls coming, and one of those phone calls was going to end up being a tragic one. And my heart was just so torn. And the thing is my heart wasn't torn because this actually truly affected my life. There were no repercussions for me if she did great or bad. I wasn't going to get a prize at the end if she did great. And nobody was going to punish me if she did wrong. It didn't affect my household. It didn't affect anything in my immediate world. But it affected somebody that Jesus told me to love. And that means it affected me. I could see who she was beyond her circumstances, and that pained my heart. So I had to make a choice. Did I continue to show her love, or did I justifiably walk away? Because most people would have said I had justifiable reasons to walk away. And when you knew all the circumstances of years prior to that, most people would have said, walk away. And I wasn't happy, and I got dressed, and I went to the hospital. And I walked in, and I sat down, and I think I crossed my arms, and I gave a look. And I made it very clear I was not happy. I just was not happy. But I loved her, and I needed to show up. She needed to know that somebody was going to show up. So after telling her how displeased I was, I told her how much I loved her and that I would continue to support her. And I would continue to try to understand where she was at. There was stuff happening under the surface. So that was almost 18 months ago. And on an almost weekly basis, I have watched her choose to love herself. And in choosing to love herself, She's choosing to show me love. That's where the gift comes in. Because in that, she's loving herself as a gift back to me. When I think of her now, I get this big smile on my face, like this cheesy smile. There's certain people that just give me this cheesy smile, and she's one of them. She's found a safe place in me to be able to be honest and to be completely herself. I don't feel anxiety when my phone goes off from her. This week I got to sit across the table from her eating lunch and talking, and it was just normal. It was just completely normal friend stuff, and it felt so good. I get to see hope in her eyes. I get to hear her be able to say, these are my boundaries. Oh, makes my heart so happy. And she's making decisions on what's best for her, not what feels good. She's never done that before. But now she's making decisions on what's best, even when it requires more sacrifice on her part. And I get to enjoy all of this. And it excites me. And it makes me want to go do it more. But to get to that gift of love, I had to walk through the grief of loving her. So this was one of many situations that I journeyed through with her that made me question if love was enough. It was at least a 6-year journey of feeling pain to get her to that point. I remember another situation last year with someone else that I loved, and I offered to put my entire life on hold for this girl. Literally offered to put everything I had on hold. And I'll never forget the phone call that came that said, "You're not going to be happy." She was telling me that she was choosing a different path, and one that I knew very well could lead to death. And waves of grief just flooded over me, and I fell on my kitchen floor. And I literally was paralyzed on my kitchen floor. Matthew actually saw me on my kitchen floor. I couldn't speak. I couldn't do anything. And again, there were no prizes for me if they did the right thing. There were no prizes that I was going to be able to say, look, look, look. And there were no consequences for me, really, if they didn't do the right thing. Again, I could have just walked away. And honestly, it would have been easier to walk away. It would have been so much easier to walk away. But love doesn't take the easy path. It chooses the path that leads to life. And that requires sacrifice. So when that call came, I had so many emotions. It literally felt like it was crushing me. I felt it in the core of my being. I felt this pain, this ache. But again, just like the other story, today I have this gift of being able to watch this person flourish and grow and heal and find out who she is beyond what the world has told her her entire life she is. And that gift would not have come without walking through that grief. I get to experience somebody's life being completely transformed. Watching them just have a smile on their face, have a glow on their face. If you've ever watched somebody's countenance change, it's like their whole being just changes. And I wish I could take pictures from, this date and match them up with 3 years later and just see the countenance difference in them because there's such a transformation. Now, most of you know, actually everybody here knows, that I just lost my friend Erica. And that was really devastating for our entire Peace Promise team. It was also devastating for all of her friends and family. And to say that Erica was special to me is very much an understatement of who Erica was to me. Just this past week, something happened, and I went to text her to tell her. And it still isn't real to me that she's not with us. Because Erica always seemed bigger than life. And she was somebody that you just knew could take care of herself. So I've looked at the past few weeks, and I've been questioning, why did it have to end in grief for Erica? Why did somebody who was so strong, who I know loved Jesus, and she knew Jesus loved her, even though she knew she was living a sinful life. And she would be the first one to tell you, yep, I'm living a sinful life, but you know what? Jesus went and ministered to the prostitutes. And I don't want to do this forever. But this is all I know right now. But Jesus loves me. And she knew that. And most people don't know this. She hadn't lived that life for over a year because she wanted to speak at our fundraising banquet. And she asked me one time, what's it take? I said, well, girl, got to quit doing what you're doing. Like, you can't speak at my banquet if you're still doing it. And that was important to her. She had just applied for a store manager position at Dunkin' Donuts. I literally had just emailed her resume. She had just had the best Christmas she had had in years. So I'm sitting there wondering, like, why did her story have to end in grief? And here's the truth that I realized. Though I'm grieving the loss of my friend's physical presence here with me, I'm already seeing the gift of her legacy. The day before her memorial service, so last Friday, as we were setting up, her next door neighbor was here. And her next door neighbor was here because her next door neighbor was in the exact same type of relationship. And her next door neighbor, the only person she had to talk to was Erica. And she knew that her boyfriend had threatened the same things that happened to Erica. And she needed to get away. And we had the opportunity to help her get away and to get to safety. And that to me is a gift. And that's a gift of Erica's legacy. Erica was the first one to tell this girl she needed to go. Erica told her repeatedly she needed to go. So she left last Friday with her kids, which ended up freaking everybody out because the boyfriend knew she was supposed to be here for the funeral. So Jason and Matthew were in full tactical gear last Saturday for the funeral, and there were a lot of people here that did not understand why they were in tactical gear and thought they were police officers, and I'm going, no, it's okay, you're safe. I've watched people who had been bickering with each other, girls that have been bickering, start to mend their relationships. I've seen people make decisions that they thought they weren't brave enough to make because of Erica. I'm watching people reach out and just want to be their authentic self. And these are all gifts that we wouldn't be able to see had we not walked through that grief. Because sitting here last Saturday going through that funeral, there was a ton of grief, but there was a ton of gifts in this room if you chose to look for them. You had to change your perspective and look for the gifts in it. And I think that that's so true in so many ways. You know, Luke 6:32-35 says, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. If you do what is good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do what is good, and lend, expecting nothing in return. Then your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High. For he is gracious to the ungrateful and the evil. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. I've seen countless people reject my love. Many don't understand the way I love, because a lot of times the way I love people doesn't feel warm and fuzzy to them. If we're being honest, I'm not always the warm and fuzzy. I'm rarely the warm and fuzzy. But I'm genuine. And when I say I love you, I truly mean that I love you. I love you the way Jesus has asked me to love you. I have a hard time agreeing with people that are living in dysfunction, like a really hard time. And even worse yet for me is the victim mindset. It just doesn't work. I can handle if you're living in sin, and I can get over that, and I can help you see why you don't want to do that. I have had people that I didn't want to love because they weren't kind to me. They were hurtful. I can remember one that rejected me to the point of turning her back on me every single time she saw me. And this was for several years. She would literally go every time she saw me. She wanted nothing to do with me, my type of love, my Jesus, any of that. And she made it very clear. And it was frustrating. And it was enough to make anybody feel like they just wanted to curl up because it made you feel so uncomfortable and so unwanted to walk in a room and have somebody do that to you. But I knew that Jesus called me to those very people. And if Jesus called me there, I needed to be there. So I kept going. I was obedient, even while I was being rejected. But after several years of rejection, guess what? The gift came. And many of you have met her because she had an amazingly adorable baby that used to be with me all the time, and his name was King. And most of the people in this room know how much his mom meant to me. But I had to push through a lot to get to that gift. And there was a lot of grief. And then her and I journeyed grief together. Watching her today is truly a joy. She is living her best life. She always wanted to be a mom. She wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And guess what? She's a stay-at-home mom, and she is doing an amazing job, and she looks like a rock star. So love, the way Jesus modeled for us, can never come with an expectation of it being returned because it's selfless. But I will tell you this, all the people that I mentioned above have found ways to show me a true form of love, and that's been by transforming their lives, by letting me be part of that, by letting me see them grow. But they've also cared for my heart when I haven't been okay. Tiana used to work at Hawaii Poke, and if I was having a bad day and I was in one of those cycles where people were making really bad choices and I felt like I couldn't do anything, I would go into Hawaii Poke, and she'd come over and she'd give me a hug, and she'd say, "Which one's messing up now?" And I always did that because I needed to see her to have hope. I do that with Nikki sometimes. I'm like, I'll call her, "I just need to see your face." And she doesn't know what's wrong. She just knows I need to see her face. I need to be able to walk in that hope. And sometimes I need that reminder. But they've also, when my dad passed away, Erica was one of the first people messaging me saying, "I'm coming to Erie." I said, "Sweetheart, you can't come to Erie." "I'm coming." Like, my whole family's here, you can't come. But she wanted to take care of me. She's like, "I'll come, I'll cook, I'll do whatever." Because the love became a back and forth thing. It wasn't a one-sided thing. But sometimes it takes years to get there. I also know that those relationships, that love that's been invested in, there's endurance in those relationships. Some of the girls that are kind of cycling back right now because of what happened with Erica, some of them we haven't talked to for months. There's been a few that we haven't talked to for years. And when they come back with love. We love the church ladies. We love being around you. We trust you. And it's because we've invested into that. So I don't want this to be a discouragement because of the fact that you're going to have to walk through grief. What I want you to take away from this is please don't be afraid to love others enough to grieve their choices and to be willing to push through that pain that you're feeling to continue to show them the love of Jesus. Because at the end, you're going to find a gift and your heart's going to overflow. And it's going to feel better than any material gift you can have. And you know what? That's the only reward you'll get, is knowing that you're going to see them in heaven and that they've transformed their life. And to me, that's enough. Knowing that somebody has transformed their entire life is enough. The last thing I want to share is that we can have confidence that when we're going through these seasons, that our grief isn't misunderstood, that it's not written off, because Jesus himself also went through these seasons of grief. He knows what we're feeling, and he is there with us. So when we don't feel big enough, we don't have to be big enough. We just have to continue to do what he has asked of us, which is to step forward, to sit, to be present, to do whatever he has asked in the moment. And he will fill in the rest, because we've watched it over and over again where we are not big enough, but he surely is. So be encouraged. Please look for the gifts, because they will always come if you choose to have the right perspective. And my friends, that is it. Okay.